Joining us at Happy Holidays Parts and Repair. Here's the questions we'll answer today. How do I use my new kit? How do we open the unit? How do I install the new motor? Tips of the day. Let's get started.
Clearing the driveway, the London Skating Club, and the North Pole Maintenance by Department 56. All these units use the same belt and are the same unit, just the tops are different. So let's get started. Today we are looking at the North Pole Maintenance Unit. First, remove the ceramic top to the unit and put aside. The next step would be to unscrew the light bulb and unplug the unit. Now, turn the unit over to access the screw panel on the back. As you can see, there are 8 screws. Remove the screws first. Screws removed, we can start to open the back of the unit. With a small flathead screwdriver, pry the base. The base should just pop off the top. This will allow you to access the drive and the motor and the wiring assembly. Be careful not to tug the wires too hard, as you do not want to interrupt any of the current connections in the unit. Now, let's look at the unit. We have the wiring assembly with its connections, the synchronous motor, the gears, the pulleys, and the drive belt. As you can see, this unit here, one of the magnets, the silver has come off the magnet. Now, the first thing we are going to do is to cut the wires on the motor. Now, with your electrical tool, splice the wires approximately 1/4 inch. This will allow you to join the wires on to the new motor. Now, set the top aside and remove the screws from the existing motor on the unit. Once the screws are removed, you can pull off the motor. Now, there might be some grease on the gear, so have a piece of paper towel handy to wipe your hands. Now, with a Phillips screwdriver, loosen the screw. The screw that comes with the old motor you will not need, as the new motor has a different size hardware. With a paper towel, grab the gear and remove it from the old motor. Set it aside. We'll use that later. The next thing you'll do is remove the belt. Now this bolt is, the silver is coming off one of the magnets, so since I have a new belt, I'm going to replace it. Wipe the unit with a paper towel just to remove any debris or dust that may be on the base of the unit. Now, let's do maintenance on the gear. Remove the screw and with a flat screwdriver, pry up the gear. Now, the kit comes with a tube of super lube grease. Remember, more is not good. Less grease on the gear is better. So just apply a small amount on the center of the gear that's going into the shaft. Once you have done this, take your Phillips screwdriver and put the screw back on the unit. Now don't over tighten it, as you might break off the plastic piece on the unit. Now check, everything should spin nice and freely. Kit from happyholidaysparts.com. The kit will come with a new motor, a tube of grease, and 2 tie wraps, and the hardware for the new motor. Now, let's get started and put the new motor onto the base. Unscrew the hardware from the motor. You have a lock washer and a screw. Now, undo the wires from the motor. We will attach the new wires to the old wires on the motor. Now, as you can see, our motor is a little bit taller, but the unit has space for 2 size of motors. So don't be alarmed if your old motor is a little thinner than the new one provided. Now, there's a couple of different ways to attach the old wires to the new wires. Today we are going to use heat shrink tubing and solder the wires together. But if you don't have a soldering iron, you can use electrical connectors of 2 types. The turnstile one, or you can buy the pinch ones. Now the yellow ones are not the correct size, but for illustration only, you have the idea. Now, cut your heat shrink tubing a little, but half an inch each. Don't want them too long. Now, take the wires from the motor and twist them on the old wires. Now, you don't have to worry about polarity, as this is a 12-volt AC system and there is no polarity for the motor wires. Now, grab your soldering iron. My soldering iron is 60 watts, but you can use less if you have. It doesn't take much heat to solder the wires on to the new terminals. Apply a little solder to the soldering iron and heat up the terminals. Spread the solder across the terminals. Once you have done this, let the wires cool for a couple of seconds. Now, you can pick up your cutters and just trim a little bit of the solder wire off. Now that you've trimmed the wires, you now can take your heat shrink tubing and slide it over the ends. Kits you see today are available on our website at www.happyholidaysparts.com. Go to Department 56, scroll down, look for motor and belt kit for these units. The heat gun, if you don't have, you can always use a hair dryer. Now, heat shrink the tubing. Just be careful not to put the heat shrink gun too close or you'll melt the terminals and the wires. Tubing shrunk with the heat, you may now go to the next step. It should only take a few seconds to shrink the tubing onto the wire assembly. Now, here is the gear. There's 2 sides to the gear, the top side and the bottom side. As you can see from the video, the top side has a little bit of a lip. That will be where you put the hardware. The flat side goes towards the motor. Now, grab your gear and press on. Might be a little tight, but it will fit. Now, lock washer first, screw second. Tighten it with a Phillips screwdriver, and do not over tighten, just enough so it's snug. Once this is done, we now can put the new motor back on the base of the unit. When tightening the screws onto the motor, be careful. Don't over-tighten. They're only plastic terminals, and plastic terminals over-tightened can strip or break off. Onto the base of the unit, we can now plug the unit in and make sure the gear everything is lined up. Now, before closing the unit, you'll want to assemble a new belt on. This is supplied on our website. As you can see, the old belt is starting to get a little worn out, so since we have a belt, we'll replace the belt. As you can see, the motor and the gear are aligned properly and are freely moving. Now, unplug the unit and put the new belt on the pulleys. The shiny side of the magnets should be facing upward. Plug the unit back in and check to make sure the magnets are flowing freely. Before closing the unit, here is a tip. Use a little bit of furniture polish and clean the back of the unit. This will help lubricate and clean. Also, do the top of the unit. This will help lubricate and clean the top for the skaters or whatever you're running on the top to run freely. Now, the kit came with tie wraps too. If you need two, use two. If you need one, use one. This will help keep the wires nice and neat and away from the gear assembly. Once the wires are tie wrapped, cut the extra tie wrap off that's not needed. Now you can close your unit. Make sure the wires are away from any terminals where you might put the screws back in. Turn the unit over and take your Phillips screwdriver and put all 8 screws back in the base of the unit. Once this is done, you are almost finished. Now that we've finished, let's plug the unit back in. Now, the first thing you'll want to do is to put the light bulb back in and make sure that's working, and put the ceramic top back on the base. Now, the people I have running on the base unit today are not a part of the unit, but I wanted to show you something. See how the unit or the characters are running backwards. This is because the magnets are not polarized properly for the belt. If you have a problem with the characters running backwards, somehow you'll need to either flip the magnets on the characters or turn the magnets around on the belt.
Thank you for watching our informative video series at Happy Holidays Parts and Repair, where the love of Christmas is all year round. Thank you for joining us.